What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about Dave Rubin. Over the past couple of years on this platform and many other social media platforms, it has become incredibly profitable and popular to make fun of Dave Rubin. And we all understand why. You make fun of Dave Rubin, you're likely to get more views on that video. More views equals more money. You're going to get some positive feedback. We all get how the social media landscape works. But what I never really understood about all these people making fun of Dave Rubin is why people were making so much content about this one person. Why was it all about Dave Rubin? And the reason I found the hyper focus on making fun of Dave Rubin so baffling is because I never personally followed Dave Rubin as a content creator. I viewed the Dave Rubin Show, the Rubin Report, very similarly to how I view the Joe Rogan podcasts. And that is, if he has a guest that I'm interested in hearing from, I'll give it a listen. But if he doesn't have a guest that I'm interested in hearing from, I'll probably give that podcast or that show a pass. I wasn't there for Dave Rubin's story in and of itself. I'm not interested in the I used to be left and now I'm more on the right kind of political stories because I'm very firm in my political beliefs, and that's just not a story that I relate to, nor a story that I find particularly compelling. But that being said, I am a content creator creating largely political content on the internet, and in my time in that role, I've come across a number of Dave Rubin critique videos. And in fact, I was actually going to make a response video to Ana Kasparian's attacks on Dave Rubin because I make a lot of TYT response videos, and that one came up, and I felt like she was not giving Dave Rubin a fair shake in her critique video. But I ended up scrapping that video before production starts. Now, usually when I scrap a video, that's the end of the story for me. But a couple of months ago, I started seeing some posts and videos related to Dave Rubin, and I decided to re-examine it and actually look into this case and figure out what's going on with Dave Rubin. And essentially, the main criticisms you'll hear about Dave Rubin over and over and over again is that he's dishonest, he changed his political orientation for financial gain, that he is not very informed about the topics that he talks about, and it's that he says the word ideas way too much across all platforms and appearances that he does.
Ideas. The ideas.
Now let's be honest, that last one is 100% true. Across the many interviews and videos that I've watched featuring Dave Rubin in preparation for this video, he says ideas a lot. And I can get why, if you're trying to make fun of Dave Rubin, that's a go-to move to point out about Dave Rubin. But moving on from that, I want to get into the idea that Dave Rubin is a dishonest political actor who is lying for financial gain. And while that's vague and it requires me to have some mind-reading abilities that I don't actually have, and I can't actually give you a legitimate answer based on what I see because I'm not in Dave Rubin's mind or in his inner circle, and thus I'm never going to be able to actually prove one way or another what Dave Rubin believes, and if there's a difference in what he believes and what he espouses, we're going to try to track his positions over time and talk about who's lying in specific scenarios as they relate to Dave Rubin. Disclaimer, everyone cares about money, and I mean everyone. Whether you agree with their political views or you disagree with their political views. I don't have donation links like Patreon, PayPal, Subscribestar, and Venmo for my health. It's because I care about money. Just like everybody else on this platform. Just like everybody else in the world. And we'll start with this Young Turks video from 2018 called Dave Rubin is a Clueless Fraud, which seeks to explain from TYT and Ana Kasparian's point of view why Dave Rubin left the Young Turks. Which is strange because the reason why Dave Rubin left the Young Turks has an incredibly simple and straightforward explanation. And I'm going to tell it to you after you hear Ana Kasparian smear Dave Rubin.
But there's this whole notion now that it's a very intellectual thing to just allow people to come on your show and say whatever they want without challenging them. That's what real journalist is. I mean, that's a real intellectual. No, it's lazy. It's because you don't know anything. It's because you're nothing more than an intellectual lightweight, okay? And a perfect example of that is Dave Rubin. So I've been quiet about Dave Rubin for years, but I know Dave Rubin probably better than anyone else in this company because we were very close friends. okay? Went to dinner at his house every weekend until all of a sudden he's not liberal anymore. All of a sudden, after getting some funding from the Koch brothers, he's now a libertarian.
Now, one of the things that you'll notice in this video is that Ana Kasparian is coming off as incredibly petty when talking about Dave Rubin. Like, the way she's snarkily saying is like, there's this notion that it's an intellectual exercise to not challenge your guests, blah, 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 is completely false, and that's for somebody who's intellectually lazy, like Dave Rubin. But here's the thing, what Anna's criticizing Dave Rubin for when you pull away all the petty insults is having an interview process that's different from the one that she prefers to have on her show.
I think that it's incredibly important to fact check the people that you have on your show.
Now look, I'm not a fan of the cable news format, where segments are like 8 minutes, there's a bunch of people ready to jump in just to say their talking points for 30 seconds before they move on to the next person who's barely responding to what the previous person said before they start on their talking points. But again, that's a difference in formatting issue, it's a difference in style. If you don't like Dave Rubin's style of interviewing, then don't watch the Rubin Report. I tend to enjoy Dave Rubin's style of interviewing because when I watch his show, what I'm looking for is a good grasp of what the person he's talking to believes, not Dave Rubin's opinion on what that person believes. However, I have a variety of tastes, so I watch different shows and different types of content with different formats when I'm looking for different things. If I want to watch somebody who's going to ask more precise questions in order to get a better articulation of a person's stated position, I'll watch somebody's channel like Nuance Bro and some of his street interviews, because that's what he does. Every time somebody gives him feedback, he responds with a specific question based on that feedback, because he's not trying to get somebody's overall position per se, he's trying to get somebody's exact position on a specific issue and get that person to question their position most of the time. Now, the reason I highlighted these two people in contrast to an interview style like what's portrayed on The Young Turks is because the approach of the interviewer is the same regardless of the political positions of the person that they're interviewing. Regardless of where Dave Rubin's speaker lies on the political spectrum, when he's conducting an interview of somebody, the reason he's conducting the interview is to let that person speak. When Nuance Bro's doing a street interview, he's there to challenge people's beliefs. I've seen him do interviews of somebody with the exact opposite views of the previous person that he just interviewed and ask them just as hard questions. By contrast, the Young Turks interview style and the Young Turks' entire program completely changes depending on who they're interviewing or who they're talking about. Look at the numerous videos where they're smearing Pete Buttigieg over petty nonsense and compare that to how they cover Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. Look at how they cover Tulsi Gabbard compared to Bernie Sanders. They're savage on the people that they don't like, but they will go out of their way to lie, cover up, and support the people that they're on board with. Now, the reason I'm breaking this down so much is because when you watch this video, you might be confused in parts of it into thinking that this is actually a content-based criticism of Dave Rubin, when in reality, it's format, style, and personal.
He's getting funded by the Koch brothers, and all of a sudden his opinions are very different. He has no political identity. He is not an honest actor. He is not an intellectual. He is a fraud. Plain and simple, and he's giving platforms to people like Milo Yiannopoulos on his crappy show. That's who Dave Rubin is.
Which is not surprising. We all know by now that Ana Kasparian, A, thinks she's better than you.
Much better than you. You are garbage.
You're garbage.
And B, while Ana pretends to be above the fray and above personal attacks, she'll immediately sacrifice all of those principles to attack somebody in the most personal and vicious ways, which we're going to get into a little bit later in this video. But if you need a refresher on that, remember Anna's comments about how wrong fat shaming is, and how her first go-to move when Alex Jones was on her stage was to insult him for being overweight. Now, one of the things you'll notice whenever the Young Turks talk about Dave Rubin is that they talk out of both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, Dave Rubin was incredibly lazy. He was lazy when he worked here, and he does a lazy show now.
No, you're lazy. He was lazy when he worked here. He's lazy now with his ridiculous show where he proves time and time again that he doesn't know anything. And why do I know he's lazy?
But on the other hand, Dave Rubin was a great guy when he was on TYT. Ana Kasparian used to have dinner at his house every weekend. Dave Rubin used to play basketball with Cenk and all of the guys on the weekends, but also incredibly lazy. He was lazy when he worked here, and he's lazy now.
I know Dave Rubin probably better than anyone else in this company because we were very close friends, okay? Went to dinner at his house every weekend. No, it's lazy. It's because you don't know anything. It's because you're nothing more than an intellectual lightweight because we were very close friends. Okay, went to dinner at his house every weekend. No, you're lazy. He was lazy when he worked here. He's lazy now with his ridiculous show.
Now, just removing all the names and all the baggage associated with the names of the people attached, to me, the person who talks out of both sides of their mouth and descends into petty personal insults is usually the bad guy in that relationship, not the person who's been relatively quiet. And remember, up until this point, his criticisms of Cenk Uygur and TYT were mostly related to the Sam Harris interview, which Cenk did a terrible job in, and criticism of that interview wasn't restricted to Dave Rubin. But this is the part that got on my nerves, especially when I figured out the context around Dave Rubin leaving the Young Turks.
And why do I know he's lazy? Why did he really leave the Young Turks? Can I please finally tell the truth about why he left the Young Turks? He wanted to make a 6-figure salary to host a 30-minute-a-week show when everyone here, you know, because we work for an independent news company, was getting paid far less while working 12-hour days. That's why Dave Rubin left the company. And now all of a sudden he's getting funded by the Koch brothers, and all of a sudden his opinions are very different.
Now Dave Rubin sounds like a really bad guy there. He wanted a raise in pay in order to stay at the Young Turks to host a 30-minute-a-week show. What's wrong with Dave Rubin? How could he? How dare he demand that from an independent news company? How dare he think he's worth that much money? Dave Rubin only cares about the money. Now, Ana and the Young Turks, of course, are leaving out a key piece of context that they're deliberately leaving out in order to make it seem like Dave Rubin left and joined the right wing for more money, and that's the only reason why he left the Young Turks, because the Young Turks wasn't able to match that pay. But that's not what happened at all. In fact, Dave Rubin got another job, but it was nowhere near on the right wing. Dave Rubin got hired right after he left the Young Turks. In fact, he left the Young Turks for this position with Larry King on his show, Pollock King. Now, the reason that context is important is because going and doing a show with Larry King was obviously a great career move for Dave Rubin. Larry King is an incredibly established figure in media, and him being able to be King's co-host for more money is a great deal for Dave Rubin. So what it seems like happened, based on what the Young Turks are saying and what they're leaving out, is that when Dave Rubin got that job offer, he gave the Young Turks a chance to match that pay or pay him close to that pay for him to stay because he liked the company and liked the people working at the company. This narrative that Dave Rubin left for Koch brothers cash is just not true, and it's not borne out by the facts. Now, by contrast, Dave Rubin's versions of events related to the Young Turks read way more true than the deceptive, out of context, misleading, and smears that the Young Turks have put out about Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin says that while he worked at the Young Turks, he really respected Cenk, the Young Turks. He was friendly with a lot of the members of the Young Turks. One of the things that bothered Dave Rubin the most about the Young Turks, and Cenk Uygur specifically, is how they treated Sam Harris, how they initially reacted to the Ben Affleck thing, how Cenk handled himself in the interview with Sam Harris, and how Cenk continued to misrepresent Sam Harris post that interview.
He watched the original thing with Sam and then sat down with Sam for 3 hours.
Right.
Did you see any of that?
Yes, I did. I watched the whole thing.
3 hours. I watched that thing. I was working for him at the time. Literally, I was like this the entire time because I was having a headache because I could not believe that this person that I work for, who I respect, who I play basketball with every Sunday, that he was so dense to the ideas that Sam was portraying. And at the end of it, just as I said to you before, that at the end of mine, I thought I had made this conversation a little bit better. Cenk only doubled down.
And the reason this reads true is because when Dave Rubin went independent after he left Larry King's show, he decided to have Sam Harris as his first guest on his program. In fact, you could argue that not only is Dave Rubin's first interview guest, Sam Harris, a direct response to the Young Turks Sam Harris interview, but Dave Rubin's entire show and format is a response to critiques that he had to Cenk Uygur's interview style, specifically with Sam Harris. Now, for those of you who might believe that I'm focusing a little bit too much on this point in time in the conflict between the Young Turks and Dave Rubin, I bring you to this clip of Ana Kasparian's appearance on the Michael Brooks Show from about 8 months ago, where still her main point of contention, the main thing that set her off about Dave Rubin, was his appearance on Joe Rogan and how she spoke about Cenk in relation to his interview with Sam Harris.
And so it was weird that he left on good terms. We're still friends. We're still hanging out. And then out of nowhere, he goes on Rogan's show. And I think that was the very first time he publicly attacked us. And he never named me. He would just say the Young Turks, or he would specifically target Cenk. And so I remember texting him and saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing? We're friends. Why are you doing this? And why are you making things up about us? He's like, well, I'm not talking about you. I'm just, I'm talking about Cenk and TYT.
Oh.
And the thing is, like, I'm kind of half the face of TYT.
Even though this has been going on for years, 8 months ago, the Joe Rogan interview where Dave Rubin was critical of Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks is still the sticking point for Ana Kasparian. And I'm going to leave a link to a 10-minute version of that portion of the conversation so that you guys can watch it for yourself, because when I watched it, I realized that Dave Rubin, not that critical of the Young Turks overall. It's mostly him saying he's really upset, or was really upset, with how Cenk treated Sam Harris, because at the time he had a lot of respect for Cenk Uygur. There's no mention of Ana Kasparian, but Ana takes offense because she considers herself one half of the TYT brand, as she stated on the Michael Brooks Show. And if you don't think Ana Kasparian is capable of being that petty of a human being, then A, congratulations for never hearing of Ana Kasparian until the production of this video, and B, check this clip out.
That's number one. I left. I told them I was leaving and I left. There were no negotiations. That's it. Actually, my executive producer, who I brought with me, they offered to double his salary if he stayed. So together we would have made more money if we'd stayed. But that has nothing to do with nothing.
Let me just say, he is telling the truth about one thing, and his husband is his producer.
Okay.
And he was really good at what he did. And so when Dave Rubin wanted to leave, we wanted to keep his husband because he was good at production. And so I don't know for sure if they offered to double his salary, but I know that he was offered a raise. And Dave Rubin was so insulted by that, because the company was basically like, yeah, you can go, Rubin, but we want to keep your husband and we'll pay him more. And mind you, this entire time, Rubin's like lobbying them to pay him more, pay me more.
So as you can see there, Ana is just laughing it up about a person that she says was her dear friend that she had dinner with every weekend, a person that she says was really friendly with everyone at TYT, so much so that they would all get together and play basketball on the weekend. Because when he wanted to leave to go to another show, when he got another opportunity in his career, the Young Turks offered his husband more money to stay, but didn't offer him anything. First of all, that's a terrible situation for anyone to be in. If you are working at the same place as your significant other, and you both got offered a job to go somewhere else, and the company only tried to retain one of you, and you thought you were both beloved by the company, you would feel terrible about that, because that's something that comes off as incredibly callous and indecent. The Young Turks knew their relationship. They knew what making an offer to one but not the other would say about the other, and they did it anyway. Now you might want to say that's just business, and it just so happens that Dave Rubin's husband filled a role that they needed more, and he was a more productive employee, so they offered him more money to retain him. But then, to take that information about somebody that you considered to be your dear, dear friend.
When Dave Rubin wanted to leave, we wanted to keep his husband because he was good at production. And so I don't know for sure if they offered to double his salary, but I know that he was offered a raise, and Dave Rubin was so insulted by that, because the company was basically like, yeah, you can go, Rubin, but we want to keep your husband and we'll pay him.
And then to make it public on a show where the host is known for going out of his way to try to embarrass Dave Rubin is incredibly indecent. That's what terrible people do. Ana knows by putting that personal information out there about Dave Rubin's marriage, that people who don't like Dave Rubin are going to intentionally use that to try and antagonize him and his husband. They don't deserve that just because Dave Rubin doesn't like the way that the Young Turks conducts interviews, just because Dave Rubin expresses political beliefs that are to the right of the Young Turks.
And then look, after watching that video the first time, I enjoyed it. And
Right.
then I felt bad. I felt bad because you can see the hurt in his face. You can see like it was like a gut punch. And I felt guilty. And I said, you know what? I've said my piece and I don't need to go at it anymore. But you keep reeling me in, Michael.
I know.
You keep reeling me in.
Godfather 3 it every time. It's too funny.
In my time on the internet, I've seen every version of petty low blows and personal attacks humanly possible. And while that's not number one, it's definitely up there. Seriously, who does that? Who does that and not only doesn't feel bad about it, but considers themselves to be the more virtuous person for doing so? For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you know I like to sarcastically tweet about what the left thinks is acceptable to say and do to somebody who they disagree with politically. But for this to come out on what amounts to a difference in opinion on format and a difference in opinion about who is deserving of an interview and who isn't deserving of an interview was beyond what I could even imagine. Now, I have a lot more to say about Dave Rubin and his political positions, but this video feels already like it's going to be way too long. So if you want me to make that video where I track some of Dave Rubin's political positions over the years, then let me know down in the comments. Give me the exact number of likes that I'm asking for, even though I'm not giving you a number, because I find people who say, if this video gets 10,000 likes, you'll get a part 2, to be cringy as hell, and I don't want to be that kind of person. So give me the vague number of likes that I want to see, but I'm not going to tell you, and you'll get a part 2. Or just let me know in the comments. I'll get a general consensus of how you guys are feeling from that. But that's all I really have for you guys today. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias if you want to support me. One-time donations on PayPal, Venmo, monthly Patreon subscribe store, t-shirt purchase, Teespring store. This has been me talking about TYT and Dave Rubin. Till next time.